Testing one, two. Testing one, two. Testing one, two. Testing one, two. Testing. All right. Well, I think we are live. I hope we are. This thing's having some issues. It says we're not connected at all. Oh, now we are connected. Okay. Are we connected or not? Can you hear me? What's going on? Hello, Texas. Hello, Mississippi, Massachusetts, everybody. Okay, I think you can hear me. I am coming to you from Guam. It is after 11 o'clock at night, and that's why I'm not outside. But I am just want got some drop frames down there. Okay, we're that okay. Connections back, connections back. Okay, there we go. Now we're connected. All right. So sorry about that. The internet at this place where I'm at tonight is apparently terrible, and I just had to switch over to my cell phone, and it looks like I got a better connection on my cell than I do from the Wi-Fi here. That's good to know. So again, just back up real quick. I'm in Guam. I am here reporting on the 80th anniversary of the battle for Iwo Jima. The survivors that are here from the battle are all around 100 years old, and I've been having a great time interviewing them and getting to know them. Very powerful stuff I'm getting. You're going to love the stories that I'm getting out of these guys. Uh, I was supposed to go to Iwo Jima tomorrow, and it got turned off because of budget cuts from the Pentagon, apparently. So they're not able to take as many people as they normally take. I don't really understand all of that, what happened there, but today we got a really good briefing on the Battle of Iwo Jima, just like every step along the battle. One of the things that really stuck out to me is the fact that in order to take Iwo Jima, which is a tiny island 2 miles wide and 4 miles long, and it had about 21,000 Japanese soldiers living in the island, not on the island, living underground in tunnels. They had 11 miles of tunnels in this small volcanic island. It took the combined combat power of almost 250,000 US troops to take that island. When you count not just the 70 something thousand Marines and soldiers and everybody that were on the island itself, but when you add up the supporting units, the sailors that were out at sea shelling the island, the bombers that were flying over and bombing the island, all of those troops together was almost 250,000 people. Contrast that to, for example, today the Marine Corps has 160,000 active duty Marines. So just the sheer force of will that we brought to bear on that tiny little volcanic rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean will probably never be seen again, and is just the everything about that battle is superlative. It's just amazing. So very interesting stuff. I am putting up some bonus videos over at chuckholton.com. So I would recommend that you go there and watch those videos. You need to sign up as a member to do that. But you get lots of cool stuff if you become a supporting member over there. You get copies of my books, you get copies of some of my documentaries, and first access to stuff that's coming out, and all this extra content that I'm making, that I'm putting up over there for members only. I actually am putting some of it here on YouTube as well for our paying YouTube members, because there are several hundred of those people, and I don't want them to miss out. So we're putting that up as well. So please make sure you share this thing. I kind of went live last minute, and so we need to get more people online, and that can happen. That can be accomplished by you hitting the like button and sharing it with your other social media friends, subscribing to the channel, and all that. Okay, so I won't bother you anymore with that. Let's talk about what's happening in Lithuania. You may know that we have U.S. troops scattered around Eastern Europe who were put there 3 years ago after Russia invaded Ukraine. They were put there as a attempt to bolster NATO, to function as a deterrent for Russia, to keep them from getting any ideas about pushing further into NATO countries. So essentially what we were doing is living up to our commitments to our European allies. And look, I know that there are a lot of people out there who are, they hate Europe. They're just down on Europe. JD Vance, just has some loathing for Europe. And it's probably because a lot of people in Europe are globalists and they're liberals. And, so he sees everything as uh, our tribe versus their tribe. It's us against them. And so he has to loathe everything about anybody who doesn't agree with him politically. And I think that's a pretty short-sighted view. I don't think that we need to expect that all the people that want to ally with us militarily would share every one of our values in terms of conservative values. So if there's a country like Finland, which is a very liberal country, or Sweden, liberal country, Norway, liberal country, and they want to be part of the military and standards alliance called NATO in order to function as a deterrent for a recalcitrant Russia who wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. There's no two ways about that. I think that we can look past our political or even our social differences in order to strengthen that military alliance. JD Vance doesn't see it that way. So he's been bashing on all of our allies, which is really spooking our allies. Second most powerful man in the world. And of course, President Trump has kind of gone along with a lot of that. And, they're angry because we're spending money in Europe. Look, the money that we're spending in Europe is not purely magnanimous on our part. We're not just doing it out of the niceness of our heart. There are some very concrete benefits to the United States for supporting NATO. Yes, it does cost us money. Yes, we spend far more than we probably should because we fund probably a quarter of NATO's budget. And the president has done a great job at getting uh, these other European countries to step up and increase their spending on the military, on their own militaries, to pull their weight with NATO. But bashing our allies over there is probably not the best way to get them to, oh, I don't know, create American jobs by buying American products. Now those countries are like boycotting American products, and especially the really expensive ones that create lots of high paying jobs like F-35 aircraft. They're deciding not to purchase American military hardware because they don't know if they can trust America to supply them with the parts. They're like, if we have to be American Christian conservatives in order to get parts for F-35. Well, maybe we'll just buy a jet fighter from France. They don't put any moral constraints on or social constraints on our countries. And so under the Biden administration, we moved thousands of troops into Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia and the Netherlands and Hungary and I think maybe Romania. Yeah, yeah, and Romania too. We moved troops into all those regions. Now those troops didn't they're not really doing much. They're not fighting, they're training. They're just there. They're kind of placeholders. They're there as a deterrent, just like the 22,000 troops we have in South Korea, just like the 2,000 troops we have in Syria, or I don't know how many we have there now. We may have pulled some out. We put them in these Eastern European countries just so that they would, uh, function as a deterrent to Russia. But while they're there, if you've got thousands, it's more than 10,000 U.S. troops total in the region. Well, they need to do something, so they're training. They're just doing their thing. They're going out and they're training on their combat skills. In the case of what happened in Lithuania, just to sort of run down what we know, we have 1,000 troops in Lithuania. There were on a training mission right up near the Belarusian border. I've been there actually, where they were, because I was there reporting on the immigration crisis a while ago, before the war started in Ukraine. The Belarusians were actually advertising in places like Iraq. Come to Belarus, we'll help you get to Europe. And so they would fly to Belarus. The Belarusians would put them on buses, take them out to the border with Lithuania, and kick them across the border into Lithuania. Lithuania is a tiny, tiny country, and 3,000 people coming across their border in a year just about crushed their whole system. It was very bad. And so anyway, I've been to that fence that these guys were, or near where these guys were. It's a very rural, wooded area, really not much of anything out there. And so they were out training. Apparently, these guys were driving a 70-ton recovery vehicle. 70 tons. I mean, think of a tank and a tow truck put together. That's basically what you're talking about. Big, 70 tons. And, they just drove off the road. They kind of decided to go off-roading. I don't know if they missed a turn or if they just thought they could, oh, we'll splash through that puddle right there. Well, it turns out that puddle is about 50 feet deep. And they went straight to the bottom. And that 70-ton vehicle was so heavy and the muck was so thick at the bottom of that bog that the whole vehicle sunk into the mud over the top of the vehicle, to the point where once they actually found the vehicle, they figured out, from the tracks that just disappeared into the water, I guess, where the vehicle was. They've sent divers down, and the divers can't even get to the vehicle because it's literally buried in mud. So they're having to, dig, and they can't do it underwater. They don't have anything. This is, one of the heaviest vehicles that, and this is the vehicle you call to recover vehicles when they get stuck in the mud. So when that vehicle gets stuck in the mud, now you're really in trouble because they really don't have another even bigger vehicle. And so what they're having to do is actually drain the swamp that this vehicle went into. Once they get the water out, which I'm reading now that they've gotten the water out. And so they're starting to dig now down to try to get to the vehicle. Now, right after it happened, the Lithuanian defense minister or somebody said, or one of the Lithuanian generals said, "Oh yes, 4 American troops died today in Lithuania," and everybody freaked out. And then the U.S. military was like, "We haven't confirmed that they're dead because we haven't even found them. I mean, we know where the vehicle is, but we can't see it. We can't get to it. We can't get it out of there." So it's there's a non-zero chance that these guys jumped out of the vehicle and ran off into the woods or perhaps got kidnapped. They were very close to the Belarusian border. So it's highly unlikely any of that actually happened. The most likely outcome or the most likely explanation is just that they were on a training exercise. They went off the road into a bog, and the bog was a lot deeper than they thought, and they sunk and they drowned in there. That stuff happens, and it happens every year. The U.S. military loses probably a dozen or so soldiers every year in training accidents. And it happened every year I was in the military. We had guys die every year in my unit, just in training, parachute accidents and vehicle accidents and rollovers and stuff like that. So Robin's asking, was it a trap or just a hole? It was quicksand. Essentially, it was quicksand. There's a swamp out there. The road goes through the swamp. I know exactly where, what area they were in because I remember being there and going like, wow, this is a heck of a swamp out here. You ever see that meme on social media that says, uh, I always thought growing up that quicksand would be a much bigger part of my life, and knowing how to survive quicksand would be very important. I remember thinking that because I used to read survival manuals and they always had a little graphic in there that teach you how to get out of quicksand. Well, how many of you have ever actually seen quicksand? I mean, very few people probably have even seen anything like that. I don't think this was actually even quicksand. I think it was a swamp, and they thought it was maybe 3 feet deep. And oh, yeah, we can drive right through that. And it was 50 feet deep. They say that the top of the vehicle is now uh, 5 meters underwater. So what's that? 15 feet, something like that, underwater. This is a vehicle that's I don't know, 10 feet high, 10 feet tall. It's a big vehicle. Anyway, so the most likely explanation is that these guys were checking their iPhones driving and texting or something, and they went off the road and they just drowned. And that's 99% that will be what they will find when they finally recover this vehicle. The Lithuanian military is out there assisting with this. They've got hundreds of people at the site now working on this, trying to extract this vehicle from the mud. But again, 70-ton vehicle in that kind of mud, they may never get it out of there. I don't know, they'll have to do something. I have no idea how you're going to do that. I'm not an engineer, but wow. But it's because they were right close to the Belarusian border, and Belarus is a ally of Russia, ostensibly. There's been some talk of conspiracy theories and things that, oh, this was a false flag in an attempt to draw Russia and America into direct combat with one another. I've even seen some people like, but oh, this must have been Ukraine that went out there and kidnapped our American soldiers and probably murdered them and threw them in a ditch somewhere, so that the United States would get involved in the war with Russia. And no, it's not. It's not. No, that's that didn't happen. Yeah, there is some other breaking news tonight. There's a very large earthquake in Burma and Thailand. So far, they know of at least 3 people that have died. The death toll will go up quite a bit from that, although I mean, 7.7 earthquake is nothing to sneeze at. I've been through a 7.1, I think was the biggest one in Haiti. Haiti was a 7.8, I think, or an 8.0, the main earthquake that collapsed that country. The difference is Thailand is a much more modern country that has building codes, and so they uh, manage to they build their buildings to withstand stuff like that. And so I only saw footage of one building that collapsed, and it was a skyscraper that was under construction, and it came down like the World Trade Center. This boom, real scary. And they say that at least 10 people, I'm sorry, at least three people they know of for sure died in that. But there are something like 80 people at least that are trapped in collapsed buildings that they know of. Those numbers will go up as well. We don't know everything yet, but apparently the damage is much worse in Rangoon, in Myanmar, Burma, than it is in Thailand. And that's understandable because Burma doesn't have the building codes that they have in Thailand. Bill says, how can we donate to your cause? Love what you do. Thank you very much, Bill. The best thing to do would be to go become a supporter over at chuckholton.com because you get a lot of cool extra goodies for that. But if you want to just donate, maybe my moderator there can put up the link tree. It's also in the description of my YouTube channel. It's linktr.ee/Holton. They'll put up the link here in a second in the chat, and we appreciate. Okay, there we go. I don't know what happened. It disconnected my Wi-Fi. That was weird. Um, so the donations are great. We use them to help people all around the world, and we've been helping people for several years now. I just sent another uh, you know bit of money to our pastor friend in Colombia. Their church is continuing to grow, and they're out of room, so they need a bigger sanctuary. Their sanctuary is like the size of my bedroom. I mean, it's not very big. And they pack like 70 people in there. It's huge. Um, so we're sending them money to hire local labor to build and help uh, expand that church outside of Cartagena. This is a church in the poorest area out there, and they really needed help. And it's great to see what they're doing. They're also um, doing ministry in the women's prison in Cartagena. So they're taking dignity kits into the prisons and then giving the girls the gospel while they're in there. Pretty cool little ministry. We like that. When will you be in Syria? I'll be in Syria mid to late April. Between now and then, I may end up going to Burma if this earthquake is bad enough and we can, help in some way. They may send me over to Burma as soon as we get done with this trip. I'm also thinking about a trip to either El Salvador or Mexico, reporting on some of the cartel activity down there. So, got a lot of stuff coming up. This year is going to be another very busy year. We've got a group of hot zonians, you guys, coming to Panama April 17th to the 23rd for a retreat, not a tour, but just a really laid back retreat up in the mountains in a beautiful mountain town where we live. And we're really looking forward to that. That's going to be kind of a vacation for me. And then the day that's over, I leave to go to Syria. And then when I get back from Syria, I'll be back in the States for a couple days for my daughter's graduation from college. And then we're off to we're going to Italy, going to northern Italy and going hiking for a couple days. And then we're going to go to Armenia for about a month, I think, and do our tour over there with some other hot zonians. We've got a great group that's coming. I think we still actually have one one room available for the Armenia trip. So if you're a last minute traveler and you want to go June 6th through the 17th on an amazing whirlwind adventure around Armenia, then get a hold of us at info@holtonnews.com. Info@holtonnews.com. Thank you, Kentucky. I want to become a Kentucky general or a colonel, sorry, Kentucky colonel. How do I get that? I need somebody in Kentucky needs to put me in for a Kentucky colonelship because I have a friend who got that, and that's pretty awesome. I want to be a Kentucky colonel. That'd be pretty cool. And I can go fry some chicken. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to talk a little more real quick about this mission that where we have 10,000 troops around Eastern Europe. They are just out there kind of, like I said, sitting there as a deterrent to Russia. And the hope is that they will, um, never have to be used for any kind of combat or anything like that. There has never been and is not now any plan to send those people into Ukraine. There will not, none of those guys are going to have boots on the ground in Ukraine. They are there to support NATO. And that multi-billion-dollar number that they keep throwing around, there's several different numbers you keep hearing about the amount of money that we've spent on the war in Ukraine. Well, I just want to point out that at least $10 billion of that is actually money that we're spending on the troops that we have in that region. These very troops that we're talking about here. They need money because we've got to house them and feed them and train them and all that kind of stuff in temporary bases over there. Apparently the bases are absolutely terrible. My son was there at a base in Poland for 10 months or something, and absolutely hated it, mostly because they just don't give those guys any freedom. It used to be when the U.S. military deployed you somewhere, you could plan on getting to know the local population, going to pick up girls, going to the bar, having a beer, whatever. Obviously, there were guys who would go out and get in trouble, but if they got in trouble, there was a uniform code of military justice to deal with that. And so they just expected you, hey, we give you a gun, so we expect you to act like an adult. Off you go. Don't be stupid or we'll cream you when you get back. Put you in the brig or whatever. Nowadays, the U.S. military doesn't trust the soldiers one iota, not one bit. So those soldiers don't get to go out on the town. They don't get to have much interaction with the local populace at all. The military basically just puts them in concentration camps over there, and they're just there just to be there, just to keep Russia from trying to run over those countries. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing for us to have troops there. And if done right, it's not much more expensive than having them in the United States. The only problem is they're away from their families. It's a hardship tour and all that. But like I said, we have the 10 billion of the 120 or so billion that's been pledged to Ukraine for the war is money that goes to feed and house our own soldiers, meaning it doesn't go to Ukraine. It doesn't get spent by Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have anything to do with that. A lot of that 120 billion goes to loan guarantees for countries like Lithuania, because we go to Lithuania and we say, hey, you buy F-16s from us and give your old Soviet MiGs to Ukraine and they'll make good use of them over there, and we will co-sign on the loan for your new bright shiny F-16s. We don't usually end up having to spend any of that money, but it's money that's earmarked as a guarantee on the loans that some of our allies take out in order to buy our products. But like I said, now our allies are not sure they can trust us enough to buy our products because they don't know if we'll keep sending them parts if they need it. And we're losing that business. But those loan guarantees are never going to get used because they're never going to actually borrow the money to buy anything. And that's another big chunk of that $120 billion, which again does not go to Ukraine. It is all in that package of, that's all wrapped up in the support of the war in Ukraine. But in reality, it doesn't, so there's so many people that don't understand how this works, and they want to blame Ukraine for wasting all that money. Well, Ukraine hasn't even seen most of that money. So, Perlock Holmes, thank you for the $10. That's very kind of you. Did you manage to speak to Hegseth at all the other day? No, I didn't get to go to the event that he held. I thought it was going to be a private event. He was going to come to the hotel and talk to these Iwo Jima vets in the ballroom or where they kind of hang out. But I was wrong about that. They took the Iwo Jima vets and only those vets over to the Air Force base and put them in a hangar with 1,000 Air Force troops and Navy and everybody else. Put a couple of Reaper drones behind the stage as a backdrop, which looked really awesome. And then Hegseth came in and went down the line of veterans and said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to all the veterans. Talked to each of them for just a moment. Then got up and gave a speech, got back in his car and left and got on his plane. I was sitting on the beach after a swim and yesterday and saw Hegseth's plane take off because when it comes out of the airport, it makes a hard right turn and went right over my hotel. And his plane took off, and then they have a C-17 Starlifter, a very, very, very large plane with security and entourage and all sorts of stuff on it. And that one took off immediately after Hegseth's plane and went right over my head. It's just amazing to watch those things. They're such large aircraft that when they're flying just a few hundred feet, they appear to be going so slowly. You just kind of wonder how they can even stay in the air. One time I was on a jump clearing mission when I was in the Army, and I parachuted into a training airfield in Fort Benning. And then a C-17 came in and did a low pass over the airfield, like a touch and go. But I was on the airfield, and I just was crouched down, and this thing went roaring over my head. I don't know, maybe 20 feet up or something. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my whole life. It's like having an apartment building bearing down on you at 150 miles an hour at 20 feet over your head, and it's the loudest thing I've ever heard in my whole life. Those planes are so impressive. Um, they're not the most impressive, they're not the biggest planes on Earth. The Russians have the Ilyushin uh, IL-76s or whatever they are, that the much bigger, not much bigger, but slightly bigger plane than ours, I believe. The Ukrainians had one that was even bigger than that, but the Russians destroyed it in the initial invasion 3 years ago. Colonel Chuck Holton. Yeah, see, that does have kind of a ring to it. I mean, I've been Sergeant Chuck Holton for so many years that I could take a hop, skip, and a jump in rank up to Colonel. That'd be great. C-17, did I say Starlifter? I'm sorry, that's a 141, isn't it? Yeah, it's late. It's midnight here. Yeah, you're right. Globemaster, not a Starlifter. Sorry. Did you notice that there are no birds in Guam? James, didn't you ask that question, that exact same question, about 212 times on yesterday's live? Because I remember seeing that question from somebody named James over and over and over and over again. not just in the chat, but in the comments after the thing. I mean, what, sir, how often do you want me to answer that question? Yes, it is very noticeable that there are no birds on the island of Guam. And they're not here because there's a tree snake that was brought in that's not native to the island that ate all the birds' eggs. They've tried to eradicate that snake. They've been unable to do so. Uh, but yes, yes, absolutely. There's no birds on the island. Stop asking. Good grief. Okay. So yeah, maybe he's just AI. I don't know. Or maybe he's just like Monk, one of those guys. Just autistic or something. And he's just like, you know, I don't understand. How many times do I have to answer that question? Okay. So I'm just giving you a hard time, James. Don't get mad. Uh, I answered it in writing. I answered it I've talked about it like every live since I've been here. So, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm on this live for an hour. I realize most of you are not. You guys are on here. It says right now the average view duration is 6 minutes and 28 seconds. So that's the average amount of time that it takes somebody to get fed up with me and go watch something else. I get it. I understand. Don't hold it against anybody because frankly, I probably wouldn't watch me for more than 6.5 minutes either. And that's why we make shorter versions of these lives for your viewing pleasure if you don't want to put up with all my pontificating and bloviating on camera. Today we went out to have lunch at a place called I think it's called Joe's Pirate Shack or something like that. Um, Jeff's Jeff's Pirate Cove, I think is what it's called. Good, just American junk food. But the cool thing is, it's near the spot where they captured the guy who was a Japanese soldier, and he was on the island of Guam. And when the United States retook Guam in 1944, August, I believe, this guy, nobody told him. He ran off into the jungle during the battles for Guam and hid rather than surrender. And then nobody ever told him the war was over. And he was so afraid of getting captured that he just stayed out there in the jungle. And for 30 years, he just lived out there by himself in the jungle. And eventually, when he finally got caught or, got found, and somebody was like, the war got over, the war ended. We're friends with Japan now. And can you imagine the feeling that you would have that, I mean, seriously, could you imagine that? MAGA Scott, I just put him in timeout so he can, because, yeah, you're not funny. I'm funny for putting you in timeout. Made myself laugh. That's good. But yeah, so this Japanese soldier, it was like in the 1980s or something that 70s or 80s that he finally came out of the jungle. And they're like, yeah, the war's been over since 1949 or 50, something like that. And he's like, what? Can you imagine? Oh, just I just wasted. uh, There's a Sunday school lesson in there somehow. That sometimes we end up in a prison of our own making, and the only thing keeping us in prison is our own ignorance. I think that's the Sunday school lesson out of that guy. But it was cool to go see. We stopped at a place where his little cave was out in the jungle, and they had a kind of a mock-up of it so you could see this guy literally lived in a 3 foot tall tunnel 8 feet underground for 30 years. How he managed to survive is beyond me. But it's a pretty interesting story for sure. We also yesterday went into, or was it the day before? We found some Japanese caves here on the island of Guam and went back in those caves, and wait until you see the video from those caves because they were spectacular. It was amazing. I'm going to be putting that up over at chuckholton.com before too long. So, folks, make sure that you not just subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, but you go over to chuckholton.com and you become a subscriber over there. Because we're putting up a lot of extra stuff. All right, that's all I've got. It is midnight here almost. And so I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to sleep in the morning. So I'm not going to be doing the typical 4 p.m. Eastern time live today, Friday, my tomorrow, Saturday, because I don't want to have to get up in 4 hours to prepare for that. So you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again when I see you. All right, take care.